Tonight I'm going to talk about Chinese licorice. And before we do that, I thought it might be good to spend a few minutes talking about cortisol. You know, it's a natural steroidal hormone that's produced in your body, in your adrenal glands. And if you were to buy it as a medication out there in the world, it would be, it's under the name of hydrocortisone. And not all cortisones be the same in terms of what's medically available to you. This, as I said, is produced in our adrenal glands, and it has an incredible effect on the human body when it's out of balance. And I mean an incredible effect if it's too high, and also a very incredible effect if it's too low. You know, cortisol affects our metabolic response, whether we can lose weight easily, gain weight easily. It affects our immune system. It affects wound healing. It affects the electrolyte balance in our body. That's kind of important. You know, the electrolytes take everything in and out of our cells for us, and if they get too far out of whack, it can elevate our blood pressure or greatly decrease our blood pressure. Electrolytes play an enormous role in doing little things like keeping your heart beating and your muscles contracting. So things that affect electrolyte balance in the body become very important. It can affect how our stomachs perform, whether we produce enough stomach acid to pre-digest our food or not enough, and then food could go into the system not properly pre-digested, which can lead to, you know, gas, bloating, pain, diarrhea, constipation. It greatly affects memory, and, you know, that's something that's really on the mind of a lot of people today with all the studies that are coming out relative to, you know, senility, depression, anxiety, Alzheimer's conditions. Those are all pretty important things that I think are taking up a lot of space. Many of us have already dealt with family members that are dealing with dementia, and it's difficult. Sleep, stress, mood, these are huge things that are affected by cortisol levels. And what a lot of people don't even realize is that when our cortisol levels go up, you know, it's a stress hormone. So first and foremost, it can pop up for any kind of stress. You know, if somebody pops out in front of you in traffic unexpectedly, boom, you know, your heart races up a little bit, bam, here comes a level of cortisol to help your body deal with it. Also a little bit of epinephrine in case you have to have that do something really fast kind of scenario. What people don't realize is that when it does that, it tends to increase our blood glucose levels. Now, when it happens in the short term, that gives us an extra boost of energy, and so it's a good thing. But when we are in a situation where it's been kind of true over the last decade and a half, where stress has become so chronic and on so many different fronts at one time, that when that cortisol level goes up and stays up, that's when we begin to experience many of the things that we all talk about. It can make it difficult to lose weight. It can make it easy to gain weight. It can trigger depression. It can literally cause you to not be able to sleep, a scenario where you go to sleep, but then an hour later you're awake, and maybe it'll take you a half hour to go back to sleep or an hour to go back to sleep, then maybe you'll get another hour. Well, we all know kind of the scenario that we do the major amount of repair and regeneration in the human body during our sleep state. So anything that affects our sleep also affects our long-term health, not to mention our short term. I mean, it's pretty hard to get up and go to work the next day when you got, you know, a half hour of sleep here or there, and now none long enough to get into deep regenerative sleep. Our immune response is both good and bad with cortisol. Cortisol prevents the release of many substances that cause inflammatory expression in the body. So anytime you got an owie, anytime you got heat, anytime you have pain, you have pro-inflammatory chemistry going out. And so, you know, if you're a person that gets allergies, or if you get a bad injury and there's a lot of swelling, one of the things doctors will often do is give you hydrocortisone so that it will help calm the situation down with inflammation chemistry. But when that level of cortisol is up and stays up for a prolonged period of time, then we start thinking about things like people with long-term chronic allergies, conditions like rheumatoid arthritis. It has a tremendous effect on some of our really good internal warriors, such as interleukin and interferon. These are guys that help us keep our body chemistry normal, help fight the development of tumors and many of the autoimmune diseases. As the list goes on, we know that one of the really scary things, and one of the things that makes cortisol very pro-aging when it stays high, out of balance for a prolonged period of time, is it tends to decrease and in some cases even stop collagen synthesis. Now, collagen is probably the most important protein in the structural part of the human body. There's proteins that, make our hormones and our neurotransmitters and our enzymes that are also really important. But when it comes to our body's ability to maintain good muscle tone, youthful looking skin, or even to repair ourselves from a cut, a bruise, or a burn, that collagen production becomes extremely important. And as we age, we don't do that as well as we did when we were a bit younger. And so anything that tends to suppress that even further can actually make you look like you've aged much more than a year in a year or even in 6 months. Cortisol tends to raise the free amino acids in the serum, and it does that by inhibiting our collagen formation. And it decreases amino acid uptake by our muscles, and so it can then make muscle breakdown much more rapid. It can slow down wound healing, and there's a number of interesting studies. I won't bore all you guys with all those studies because I know you don't get off the way I do. But there are a number of interesting studies where even the amount of stress that you experience even 3 days prior to a dental appointment or a doctor's appointment is enough to elevate your cortisol levels in such a way that if you get an injection in your mouth to have a tooth worked on, because of the anticipation of that happening in your life, the cortisol level goes up, and it can slow the wound healing by as much as 40%. Okay, it affects our stomach and our kidneys. It regulates how much gastric acid secretions we have, and it also affects how the body excretes ammonia. Now, ammonia is the end result of everything we eat. Some foods are really high in it, and others not so much. The sugars and the starches tend to generate a very high ammonia level. If you stay there for very long, you can develop dyslexic behavior. You can, excuse me, you can end up having chronic headaches that don't seem to be fixable by any other thing. So the reason that I'm talking so much about cortisol tonight is because when we talk about Chinese licorice, it is probably the best known herb for helping the body rebalance cortisol of all of the ones you can look at. Now, cortisol is just one of the stress markers, but it's a biggie because it affects so many of our body's symptoms. So Chinese licorice is known as Glyceria urulensis. And, in this country, we're kind of familiar with licorice. It's been out there for a long time in the form of glabra, which is a more European and American form of licorice. And the plants, all the plants in the Glyceria family contain a chemical that is pretty well known in many adrenal formulations, and glycyrrhizin. And it's amazing that in such a small amount, this compound from this plant can have such a very profound effect on the body. In fact, it's rather remarkable. Certainly in the United States, maybe 30, 40 years, it's become pretty well known. But when we talk about the Chinese form of licorice, it's been known for hundreds of years. Hundreds of years. And in fact, the Greeks, the Romans, the Asians, the Japanese, the Koreans, Pakistani, India, every one of them has their own name for this particular plant. And in Chinese medicine, it is used in a number of multiple ways, and it's considered one of the foundational herbs. They have a list of 50 herbs that are considered the foundational herbs that almost everything is made from. And very often, this particular compound is used in all of them because it has an effect of modulation and increasing the availability of the compounds from other herbs. So it serves any formulation in a multitude of ways. First, it imparts its benefit to help balance inflammation in the body, improve circulation in the body. And by the way, it tastes really good. It has kind of a sweet taste. So even in our country, some of that is used as a natural sweetener for many oral medications for children and for senior citizens who take medications usually in a liquid form. It's also used in candy production and in baking. It's out there really quite a lot. If you start snooping around, you'll find it in many, many, many places. Now, it's certainly been ranked very high in the literature in all of those countries that I just mentioned. And there's kind of an interesting story about a guy that was a doctor in China who had his own little home clinic, and he had to go away for a while, and he had 4 sort of students who worked with him in his clinic. And so when he left to go out of town, he knew he was going to be gone for a certain period of time. And so he prepared all of these constitutionals, we would call them in this country, but basically formulas that would be needed by the people that they saw on a regular basis. We're going back some now in time. As luck would have it or not have it, the doc didn't get back in time, and the students began to run out of the medicines, and they didn't know what to do. So evidently out behind the clinic is a place where the doctor would cook up all of these various tinctures, and they found some pans with leftover material. They harvested some of these herbs that were just growing wild in the backyard, and voila, without realizing it, Chinese licorice was born into medicine. And we don't know whether that's true or not, but it's reported in so many of the herbal manuals, whether you're talking about Culpeper or Gerard or even more recent books from the 50s forward in the United States. It's kind of interesting that sometimes an idea just has to get born, and sometimes it happens under very strange circumstances. So we see now that with this particular compound, we're in a very unique place because we know that it affects circulation. We know that it affects digestion. We know that it affects our cognitive function and our memory. We know that it affects our stomach. We know that it has all of these good benefits to the body. And we also know that when you put it on a team, it becomes sort of the leader of the team. It helps all the other parts of the team do their job even better. It's very cohesive, in other words. It's an herb that I am extremely excited about, and I know that Mark Primmer, our formulator and chief scientist, is a guy who's worked, very long and very hard doing research and studies and experiment, and I can't imagine that we would ever have a formula, an adaptogenic formula done correctly that didn't contain Chinese licorice. And I'm looking forward to having it. I'm so excited about this product getting here that I'm ready to get on a plane and fly to Florida and go get it. I'm telling you, Rob, it's a really good thing to know that pretty soon all of our people are going to be experiencing this product and being able to have testimonial calls about what people are experiencing. I've got about 20 clients now who are just waiting to get their hands on it. And it's because stress is rampant. I mean, even good stress, because some stress is good, right? It inspires us, it gets us moving, but still, you can get so wound up that when you go to bed at night, you can't go to sleep. Or even if you do go to sleep, you don't get that deep, restful sleep, which is such a significant part of our overall long-term wellness. So I'm betting that we're going to find out that a lot of people notice something pretty quickly. Now, the interesting thing about adaptogens, and I think we might have talked about this once before, or maybe I just thought about it, but adaptogens tend to work the fastest on the people who need it the most. You know, so much in complementary formulations and programs, people who are really down and have a long ways to come back to get to that level of health and vitality that we all want to have and maintain for our entire life. Lots of times the people who have been through the most are the slowest to respond. It can take a while to sort of rebuild the body. And yet where stressors are concerned and where adaptogens are concerned, a really good adaptogen, which we have, by the way, and there aren't that many out there, the people who need it the most respond the quickest. That's almost counterintuitive to me that we can have this formula where the people who are of the greatest need get to see the benefit the very first. Now, all of us have stress. There isn't anybody that people say to me all the time, I don't think I'm stressed. Well, you got the belly fat. According to your blood test, your blood sugar levels are going up, up, up. You know, chronically each year with the test, we're seeing your fasting glucose be a little bit higher. Oh, and did we mention that cortisol has a tremendous adverse effect on bone density? Well, now, Mary, your current scan says that you have osteopenia, which is the beginning of osteoporosis. And oh, you know, 10 years ago you were 12 pounds above ideal body weight. And now all of a sudden we're 30 or 40 pounds above ideal body weight. And oh, you didn't used to have allergies, but now you find in spring and autumn that your eyes are irritated and your nose is a little bit drippy, but you don't seem to have any stress. Well, you know what? The body's smart and the brain's smarter. The brain processes hundreds of thousands of bits of information per second, and it hates it because it's got so many jobs to do 24/7. So it ships it downstairs. So you can feel like in your brain that you have no blooming stress at all. And yet you start looking around at what some of the symptoms are of being stressed. And let me tell you, pretty soon, check mark that box, check mark that box, check mark that box. Almost all of us are experiencing stress in one form or another. And it's not just those of us in the over the hill group. I am seeing more stress in high school students and college students than I've ever seen in my entire career. So now we have a wonderful adaptogenic formula that is going to address stress from many different pathways in the human body. That's really important to me. You know, there are individual adaptogens that have one or two herbs in them that deal just with, let's say, serotonin. And that's good because it elevates your mood and it helps you sleep. There's no doubt about it that having that imbalance in your body is one of the signs of stress. But that doesn't talk about collagen. It doesn't talk about gastric issues. It doesn't talk about circulation issues. It doesn't talk about skin issues. It doesn't talk about bone issues. Here we have a formula that we can put into the body, and with a great big beautiful golden bowl, it says, here, body, this is for you. And you get to use it however you want. And it will go to work on what is most important to it first, and then it'll go right on down the list. It is such a joy to know that we are bringing something to society that can have such a beneficial effect on people's overall wellness. What do you think? How about people's overall mood? You've all heard the statement, by beholding you become. We've all heard stories about riot mentality, where you're a normal, loving, kind, and wonderful person, and you get caught up in a group of people that are demonstrating and gone crazy, and before you know it, you've gone crazy too. That frequency is out there. How much of effect do we get to have when we can bring a formula like this forward, and it's going to help people be in a happier mood? What are we doing to that stress energy? We're making a difference. What are we going to do? What are we doing to the family dynamic if mom and dad aren't so stressed out? Isn't home going to be better? Isn't the workplace going to be better? Isn't the community going to be better? Isn't, in fact, the world at large going to be better? Because we've shifted energy from a negative to a positive, all by helping people get a little stress relief and a little better health. I'm pretty excited about this, you guys, and I can't wait to hear the testimonials.